right, good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be discussing healthy living as you get older. So the first thing that we're going to be discussing is nutrition. So whether you're overweight, underweight, or somewhere in the middle, getting a proper balance of nutrients is incredibly important to maintain a healthy life. And so that's going to be a balance of proteins, carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, and minerals. And if you're not able to get balanced nutrition from your diet, there are some nutritional supplements out there like Boost and Glucerna. Some people also take a multivitamin to help them get the proper vitamins and minerals. So there's a couple good diets that you can follow that'll help you live in a healthy way. The first one is the DASH diet. And so that's based on eating primarily things like fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. And then also incorporating some low-fat or fat-free dairies, lean meats, beans, nuts, and vegetable oils. And then you want to make sure that you limit high-fat foods like cheese or fatty meats or sweets and tropical oils. So those are the main principles of the DASH diet. There's also the Mediterranean diet, which is very similar. It's basically you eat plenty of plant-based foods like whole grains, vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, and seeds. And then you also want to include healthy fats like olive oil or fish rich in omega-3 fatty acids like mackerel, albacore tuna, and salmon. And then you can have a little bit of poultry and lean meats, but you want to limit those to some extent. And then occasionally eat red meats or sweets. And then the Mediterranean diet also allows you to consume red wine in moderation, but in moderation is no more than a 5-ounce glass per day. So the DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet are both really great for maintaining health, whether it's heart health or diabetes. They're relatively easy to follow and fairly inexpensive. A few other important components of good nutrition is fiber. Getting enough fiber is very important for heart health. It can be helpful for reducing your cholesterol levels. It can be helpful if you have diabetes or obesity. And the typical adult should eat about 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day. So just to give you an idea of what that looks like, a slice of whole wheat bread has about 2 grams of fiber. 1 cup of broccoli has about 5 grams of fiber. So getting a lot of vegetables, whole grains, and fruits in your diet will help you get a lot of fiber as well. Another thing to keep in mind is salt intake. A lot of people eat a large amount of salt. Adults should consume no more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. So that's a single teaspoon of table salt. But the average American usually eats more like 3,400 milligrams of sodium per day. And it's important to keep in mind that a lot of foods have hidden sodium, if you will, like canned food, canned vegetables, soups, frozen dinners, prepared meals. Those all can have a lot of sodium in them, so it's important to keep that in mind. If you have high blood pressure or certain heart conditions, you might even need to limit your sodium intake further to about 1,500 milligrams per day. Another thing to keep in mind is sugar intake. A lot of Americans eat far more sugar than is recommended. Women should consume no more than 25 grams of added sugar per day, and men should have no more than 36 grams. And the typical American eats about 77 grams of added sugar per day. Now it's important to note that this is added sugar, and that's a little bit different from natural sugar. So added sugar is any kind of sugar that's added to a product during production. There are a lot of foods that do have naturally occurring sugars, like fruits typically have a lot of sugar, but that's not added sugar, that's natural sugar. So just to kind of put that into perspective, one 12-ounce regular soda has about 32 grams of added sugar. So that would already be what you should ideally have in an entire day. If you're somebody who has diabetes or pre-diabetes, they recommend that you should have no more than 25 grams of added sugar regardless of your gender. or really attempt to avoid added sugars altogether. A lot of foods have what we call hidden sugars, or might have more sugar than you would expect. And some good examples of this would be cereal, granola bars, or fruit juices, especially fruit cocktails. You might think that these seem healthy, but they can actually have a lot of sugar, so it's important to read the nutrition label. So watch out for ingredients like fructose, sucrose, dextrose, anything that ends in ose. That usually is a sign that it might be a sugar. High fructose corn syrup is another one. And then there's also sugar alcohols. These are really sugar substitutes. They're not actually sugar, but the most common ones are xylitol, sorbitol, and mannitol. They're used as sweeteners, as a substitute for sugar, and they actually can still raise your blood sugar. They also sometimes upset people's stomach, especially if you have a history of irritable bowel syndrome or just a history of having a sensitive stomach. So after nutrition, it's important to stay hydrated. A lot of people don't drink as much water as they should. Most people should get about 6 to 8 cups of water per day. But if you have certain health conditions, you might have to limit your fluid intake, certain things like heart failure or kidney disease. But that's something that you should discuss with your doctor if you might think you might fall into that category. Now, hydration doesn't always have to come from drinking water or fluids. Soups and stews are one way that you can get a lot of water from food. But something to keep in mind when it comes to soup is you want to make sure you get the low sodium versions, because they can have a lot of salt, like we talked about before. Vegetables and fruits can also have a lot of water in them that just occurs naturally. Celery, lettuce, cucumber, watermelon, those are all really good sources of water that you can have in your diet. Keep in mind that drinking lemonade, soda, or coffee, or even sweet tea is not going to hydrate you as well as water will. I know a lot of people like to drink those, but they can have a lot of sugar as well, and it's just not going to hydrate you like water will. You also want to watch out for sports drinks or drinks with electrolytes. Gatorade in particular sometimes has a lot of sugar in it. And then as far as drinks with electrolytes, some medications can affect your electrolyte levels, like your potassium level in your body. And so if you're drinking things that have electrolytes, that could make your levels become too high. The next thing is physical activity. So ideally, we want people to get about 90 to 150 minutes of moderate activity per week. But if you're someone who doesn't normally get much physical activity, just start small and work your way up to the goal. Even if you just start out at 10 minutes a day, or just start out by walking a few steps further than you normally do, you can eventually work your way up to that goal. And there are some really great low impact activities that can be good for your health. Things like walking, chair exercises, and water aerobics and resistance bands can all be good ways to get a little bit more active. Now, another one is vaccines. Vaccines are very important for preventing disease. So there are a few that you should get as you get older. The first one that's very important is the pneumonia vaccine. So the CDC recommends that when you turn 65, you should get 1 dose of the Prevnar 15 vaccine, and then 1 dose of the Pneumovax 23 vaccine a year later, or 1 dose of the new Prevnar 20 vaccine. Some people might have received a vaccine for pneumonia earlier on in life if you have certain conditions like asthma. But even if you got one of the vaccines earlier on in your life, you should still get the pneumonia vaccines when you turn 65. Another really important vaccine for older adults is the shingles vaccine. So a few years ago, they introduced the Shingrix vaccine, which is a 2-dose series that you get 2 to 6 months apart. It's recommended once you turn 50 that you get that. And some people got the older shingles shot, the Zostavax vaccine, which is just 1 shot. If you did get that a few years back, then you should still receive the Shingrix shot. You should also get an annual flu vaccine. If you're over 65, ideally you should get the high dose flu vaccine, but just any flu vaccine is important to get every year. And then tetanus shot, that's one that I think sometimes we forget about. So you should get the Tdap vaccine, which is a combination of tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis once, and then every 10 years after that, you should get either Tdap or TD vaccines. And then the last thing that we're going to talk about today that's important for healthy living is taking your medication. It's really important to take your medication as they're prescribed to you because they won't work if you don't take them. It's also important that if a medication is prescribed to be taken a certain time of day or with or without food, that you take it like that, because that can affect how well the medication gets into your body and how well it works. So sometimes people have trouble remembering to take their medication, especially if you have a lot of drugs that you're taking regularly. So a few tips that can help are you can use a pill box to organize your medication. This is also really helpful if you sometimes can't remember if you took a medication already, because if it's there in your pill box, obviously you didn't take it yet. Also, if you have a smartphone, you can set alarms to remind you when it's time to take your medication. Or you could try incorporating your medication into your routine. Let's say you have something that you do every day at a certain time, like you watch the news every night at 7. If you make it part of your day to take your medication when you watch the news, then it'll be easier to remember that you need to take it every day. Another thing you can do is keep your pill bottles or your pill box somewhere where you're going to see them every day. So maybe sit them on your dresser, and that way they're always there. You'll notice them, and that'll help you remember to take your pills. And then if you're still struggling to keep up with your medications, even after trying different tricks and tips, you could always ask your doctor if there's a way to simplify your regimen. There are some combination pills out there where maybe instead of taking 2 medications, you could take 1. So that's something you could ask your doctor about. There are also some services that pharmacies offer that might make it easier for you to get your medications. There are pill packing services, and basically what pharmacies will do is they'll create a daily pill pack for you where it'll have all your medications that you're supposed to take in the morning together and already laid out for you, kind of like a pill box, so that you have it already organized for you. Some pharmacies also have home delivery. If you ever have trouble getting to the pharmacy, that can be a really good option. So that way you don't have to worry about trying to get to the pharmacy. They also have prescription synchronization, so you can get your prescriptions lined up so they fill on the same day every month. And that way you only make 1 trip to the pharmacy instead of several. And then some pharmacies also offer automatic refills so that you don't have to try to remember to call in when you need a refill. Another thing, if you have trouble reading directions on your medication bottle, some pharmacies have apps on your smartphone where you can scan the bottle and it will read out the directions for the medication out loud for you so that you don't have to try to read it on the bottle. And then if you ever have trouble opening your pill bottles, you should ask your pharmacy about easy open caps, because that can help you make it easier to open the bottles as well. So those are some helpful tips for some healthy living.